Hey,
No, no, no.
hey, Steve.
Hi, Greg. We're
How are you
back.
doing? Yeah. All
I'm
right.
doing good.
Good. Good. All right. Well, we're on to episode 4, and if anyone suffered through those first episodes, I think we had some audio uh, issues, but great content, in my opinion. So we're trying to solve that. So, welcome to Bird Brag, everybody. I'm Greg Carson.
And I'm Steve Scott. It's great to be here.
Oh, it's always good to be here. All right, we're here to talk about nature and stuff. But before that, you know what I always ask Steve? What's to drink?
Well, I think today I'm going to try to put this on the camera here and keep talking so that it keeps my camera on for the YouTube feed, is a Lizard's Mouth from Figueroa Mountain.
Mm.
And it's an IPA.
Have you had
And
it before?
I have. It's a 9% alcohol, so it's pretty stout. But it kind of I went shopping this morning and it kind of grabbed my attention and inspired one of the topic for this
Oh, very good.
podcast here.
Very good.
How about
Um,
you?
all right, so I got Basil Hayden's Kentucky Straight Bourbon Whiskey, and I got a good story behind this guy because I was this is years ago. I was at the Clift Hotel with a couple friends. One's British, one's Scottish, and I just assumed that when we ordered some late drinks that the Scot was going to be ordering a Scotch, and he ordered the Basil Hayden's, and I was kind of blown away. And he said that when he's in the States, that he tries to drink some American whiskey or bourbon, and this was his go-to. And I hadn't had it before, and now I love it. So
Oh, do you spill something?
ice in my glass. So let me try that again.
We need a new sound effects department, I think.
All right. Oh man, that was a big pour. All right. Cheers, Steve.
Cheers, Greg. So a couple other things. So the Figueroa Mountain is actually kind of my brother introduced me to that because it's pretty close to where he lives. And so he always sends me some Fig Mountain beer, like for Christmas and things like that. And you know how I'm not a huge IPA guy. They all taste about the same to me. I know that's probably heresy to a lot of the beer drinkers out here, but this one seems pretty good.
I'm not an IPA guy as well, and it just doesn't sit well with me. I'd rather have a stout than an IPA, to be
Mhm.
honest with you. It's just something about the taste, as my big brother would say, that taste just jumps in my mouth, and it's and so yeah, it's not my deal. But when you find a good, every once in a while, there's especially to me the colder weather, fall and winter, that there's
Yes.
time for an IPA. But as you know, I'm a Pilsner guy, so. Um, all right, what's our topic today? What's our subject today?
So since we're drinking Lizard's Mouth, I thought we might want to go into a lizard. So today we're going to be talking about the Great Basin Collared Lizard.
Great Basin. What was it?
Did I lose you?
Yeah, you lost me.
Collared lizard. So like the collar,
Okay.
priest collar.
All right.
Yeah.
Why are we choosing this lizard?
So when I saw the Lizard's Mouth beer, it kind of instantly transported me back to when I was a kid. And so my dad, just a little background, he was a zoologist by training, and so we were always doing stuff outside and looking at animals, and that was a big part of my childhood growing up. And we had this huge book cabinet in our entryway of our house, and it had all these field guides and wildlife manuals and all kinds of stuff. And we were really interested in snakes and lizards. And so before I had ever seen this lizard in the wild, I had looked at it in the field guide and stared at it because it's just a really neat looking lizard. So it kind of captured my imagination from even before I'd actually seen one actually in the wild.
All right. So let's, like I always ask, paint the mental picture for us. What does it look like? What are we dealing with?
So as far as kind of most
I
lizards
really
go,
want it to be like a ginormous, like
Mhm.
why have the name just what's the one of the bigger lizards?
So like an iguana or
Yeah. Is that
a
what we're talking
yeah.
about?
So it's fairly big, but not like that.
Okay.
So so one interesting a term they use for lizards a lot is the snout to vent length.
Mm-hmm.
When describing their length. So obviously that's from the tip of the nose to their vent, which is their cloaca, which is basically a combined waste and reproductive tract. And so that's how they measure most of them, because if you measure a tail on a lizard, lizards can drop their tail. So you might not really get accurate measurements that really reflect how old the lizard is or what size it is. So the snout to vent length on a colored lizard, a big one will be, a little over 4 inches long.
All right.
They're not huge,
No.
but the tail can be twice that long. So you have this, 4.5-inch lizard with maybe a 9-inch tail. So the tail can be pretty impressive.
I didn't make a single joke from that. So
well,
I'm really being an adult here. And so coloration, what are we talking about for color?
So they're pretty variable, but one thing they kind of, if you think of it as like an Adobe Photoshop project, you have kind of layers you paint on. So kind of the base color, you're going to have these kind of pale bands that are greenish or tannish, and then alternating with kind of a pinkish or brownish bands that go down the body. And all that's kind of overlaid by these small white spots. So that's on the kind of the main body part. And then the way it got its name, the collared lizard. So right at its neck, it has two black bands with a white band in the middle that kind of look like a collar. And so that's what they look like coloration wise. And then they do have a fairly large head as far as lizards go compared to the rest of their body. So it kind of does make them look a little more fearsome than their small size would have you think.
And I mean, does it look like it's friendly? Does it look like it's fierce? Or is this something like that spiny?
It's not spiny. So, there are a lot of lizards that have kind of spiny scales and big scales, but collared lizards have what they call granular scales. So you look at where it's kind of like grains of sand or salt pepper or, salt grains. So they're these small scales. They're pretty smooth actually, but the size of the head compared to the lizard, and they have a huge mouth because they can, they like to eat big things. So the mouth alone could give you pause if you're a kid out trying to catch lizards, and they will readily bite you if you try to catch them.
Does it hurt if they bite? They're gonna sting?
Break
the skin?
It probably scares you more than it hurts, but they can break the skin for sure and cause you to bleed a little bit. But it's nothing that I would really say hurts, but it's shocking, I guess is the word for it.
Yeah. Is this something kids keep as pets?
Sometimes they're not the greatest pets as far as lizards go. The food they eat typically in the wild isn't what you're going to be able to buy at a pet store to feed them. Not that they won't eat crickets and mealworms and things like that, but and they're not the greatest with being handled on a regular basis. So they're probably not the best pets to have.
All right. And so where do these guys live?
So as you could probably tell by their name, is they're primarily restricted to the Great Basin. So the Great Basin is that big desert region in between the Sierra Nevada and the Rocky Mountains. So the center part of their range is probably in Nevada, but they're in Eastern California, Utah, and Arizona. They do come down into Southeastern California as well.
And so will you see these things by their lonesome? They hang out in groups?
No, they're typically by themselves, like most lizards are, and a lot of times they're a lot of lizards aren't active during the really hot parts of the day. It's a little too hot for them, but collared lizards are active at pretty high temperatures, and you'll see them out sunning on rocks and stuff like that, and in kind of prominent positions where you can see them. And so they are readily observable when you go out and into the right habitat.
Okay. So what about reproduction? Are these guys explain that. Go into that.
There's not a lot unique about their reproduction. They they lay they lay eggs and that are buried under the soil, and then the eggs hatch out, and it's
Like how many
pretty
eggs? We talking
pretty
two?
amazing.
Talking 200?
Man, you're trying to go. It's definitely a low number.
It
Um,
is.
yeah, most lizards don't lay tons of eggs, like we were talking about the fish.
I just
So
assumed. That's funny. I just assumed it'd be like a pile of eggs. I
according
don't know.
to
I don't know why.
the Bible here of California reptiles and amphibians,
Uh huh.
their clutches vary from 1 to 12, but usually they're around 4 to 7.
Hmm.
Yeah, and they can have one or two clutches in a season.
What's the season? Is that, I'm going to guess, spring?
Yeah, I mean, so a lot of these it depends, on the area. So a lot of animals throughout the world, really, they base their breeding season on kind of when food sources are available for the young. So in the desert, in the middle of the summer, you don't have a lot of insects and things like that because it's too hot. So oftentimes the breeding season will be restricted to kind of the cooler months of the spring and things like that. And then, so they'll breed then, and then the eggs will be there, and they hatch out later in the year when maybe some of the insect activity is picking back up. Kind of similar things you see in some of the deer species throughout the country is, in different parts of the country, they'll breed at different times to take advantage of different food sources. One kind of notable example being like in the southwestern deserts, a lot of the deer breed a lot later because they want to have their young when they're kind of the monsoon rains are happening late in the summer rather than in the spring.
All right. And then you said you wanted to know more about about the Great Basin Collared Lizard before you even laid eyes on it. You'd seen it where?
So when I was a kid, I had this very similar to that book I just held up to the camera here for our YouTube watchers. But, we had a field guide, and all the field guides, they have the pictures. And of course, the picture they put in there is of the most beautiful collared lizard ever. And then they'll have a range map. And I could tell from the range map that they should be where I lived, but I had never seen one. And when I was a kid, I used to be gone from the house all day long, and probably 75% of the time I was catching lizards, and I'd never seen one. And then one time we went fishing at a place that I grew up called Pleasant Valley Reservoir. And we started walking up to where we were going fishing, and there was a collared lizard. And I spent about the next 2 hours trying to catch that lizard, because and I didn't fish until I caught that lizard. And I didn't have, typically when I was a kid, we'd use a noose. So the nooses we'd make were basically a fishing pole that was broken or didn't have a reel on it, with some fishing line kind of tied in a sliding loop, that you could put over their head if you were careful, and pick them up and then take them off of that. And I didn't have that with me, although I could have made one, I guess, since I had a fishing pole. But I caught it with my hands, and like I said, I probably spent a couple hours doing that. Man, I got bit, but it wasn't a very big one, so it didn't break the skin or hurt or anything. And that was pretty exciting time for us. Probably maybe, I don't know, 10 years old at the time, and that was a pretty good day for a 10-year-old.
So catch and release, you let that thing go. You didn't try to take it home.
Yeah. Although I did keep some lizards and snakes when I was a kid. That one I didn't take home.
Got it. Any other traits? Any other factoids that I'm missing on this guy?
So they eat, when they're younger, they eat a lot of invertebrates, beetles, grasshoppers, spiders, things like that. But then as they get bigger, they do a pretty good job of eating whatever they can fit in that big mouth I was talking about. And they're in a family of lizards that are kind of known lizard eaters. So there's collared lizards and leopard lizards that are very closely related. And when they get bigger, they eat a lot of other lizards. So that's one of the things that's kind of interesting about them. They'll eat lizards and small snakes, and sometimes even small rodents. So they'll catch a mouse and eat that. And
wait a minute, this 4-inch lizard will eat a mouse?
Yeah. In fact, yeah, they will. I didn't have a fact after I said in fact, so I'm not sure
Well,
why it's.
I'm just trying to figure out how a 4-inch lizard eats a 2-inch mouse.
Well, that's the thing.
Well, I
Like,
guess that's like the old joke, right? How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time.
yeah, but the thing is the whole mouse is basically one bite because it's not like they have the teeth to be able to chew up these prey, and silverware to cut it up into pieces. So it's kind of an issue in the reptiles and amphibians, like bullfrogs and these lizards and things like that. I mean, they swallow these, and snakes. They swallow these enormous meals, and they're pretty much incapacitated after that. In fact, I've seen bullfrogs that actually have died because they tried to swallow something that was too big for them, and it ultimately ended up killing them because it cut off all their air supply and everything. So sometimes it is definitely a case of their mouth, their eyes being bigger than their stomach is.
Yeah, it's the way that I look at a 1.5 liter bottle of Tito's.
Well, but is that a problem? I mean,
no, I'm incapacitated at I definitely have, I'm incapacitated after that. That's it sounds very familiar.
We talked a little bit about the kind of biologist speak with the snout to vent length. And I should read you this so I don't botch it. So this is that same book I read, but so this is the last sentence in the description of the collared lizards. Locomotion is bipedal at high speed.
That's not a poem. That's a fact. Just say it again.
It might be a haiku if we broke it down. I'll bet we could make a
man. So 575, right?
Locomotion is. No, we can make it one though.
Okay.
That's gonna be
so explain the phrase.
So you think of lizards most of the time as walking around and running around on all fours, but at high speed, collared lizards will actually get up on their hind legs and just run on their back feet when they really want to book it after, like another lizard or something like that, or get away from a predator.
So when we were kids, the big thing was the Jesus Christ lizard, the one that would run on its hind legs and run across the water. So that's what the image I have in my head.
Yeah, you're nailing it, except it's not running across the water for the most part, because where they live, there's really not usually a lot of water.
Did I have that right? Was that the name of that lizard? Was that like what they called that lizard? I don't know if
they
it was
do call that. I'm not sure what the actual name of that lizard is, but yeah, they do call it that.
All right, we'll put that in the pipe for another discussion then.
That's a good point, because at some point we're definitely going to need to.
It was
radiate
one of those
out.
Great shows. Remember Ripley's Believe It or Not?
Oh,
was that? Oh man, how much did I love that show? Do you remember That's Incredible?
Yes.
Oh,
well, they were back to back.
Right, they're back to back, to back. Oh man, that was Sunday nights. Was it on Sunday nights?
I think so.
Yeah.
We just lost all.
I think it was ABC.
I think that it was because growing up where collared lizards are, you only get one TV channel, and what I got was ABC.
So what else?
Love Boat, TJ Hooker.
So you didn't see any Dukes of Hazzard when we were, because that was CBS. Or Magnum PI. You didn't see any Magnum PI. Steve, well, I know what you're doing during quarantine. Then you got to catch up.
So, like, the only football I got was Monday Night Football.
Wow.
And I used to live for Howard Cosell at halftime.
Replaying the games. Oh yeah.
That was my football for the week.
So when I was a kid, we'd play what was then called, it wasn't fantasy football, called rotisserie football. Yeah. And my brother and dad were really the ones doing it, and they let me kind of play along. And one of the ways that they got their stats was in the paper Monday morning, but they also would dispute those stats by the replay on Monday Night Football. And Steve would sit and take notes. Distinctly remember this.
Like to try to pick up yardage off the highlights?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. No, it was amazing.
Although I could see Steve doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it was that, man. So I'm trying to think of other things that you might have missed. BJ and the Bear? You never saw BJ and the Bear?
I've never even heard of BJ and the Bear, to be honest.
That was during Friday nights. Dukes of Hazzard night.
Okay.
It was a big deal. All right. Any other facts you want to leave us with on the Great Basin? No?
You're gonna stick with just the Great Basin. So no, not really. I mean, they're just, they've been one of my favorite lizards for all time, and apparently we're short on the podcast, so you're trying to probe me for more information.
No, it's before. So we talked about, we always have to end with something else. We talked about sports in the first 3 episodes. And so I was going to mix it up and ask about some TV, because I just saw 2 things that stood out to me, both Netflix specials. The new Seinfeld stand-up. That might be HBO, but I'm pretty sure it's Netflix. It's Netflix. Okay. Have you seen that?
I have not seen it.
I like Seinfeld. I was crying laughing.
Okay.
It was, and I didn't realize, I guess, didn't remember what a physical comedian he is, and like his using his hands and body, and I mean, it's one of the, I love stand-up, and I can't say I watch a ton of it, but I watch a fair amount, and that's like one of the funniest things I've seen. All right, so then, have you heard of Ricky Gervais's Afterlife?
Oh man, I love that show, and in fact, you originally turned me on to that.
Did you see the second season yet?
We haven't watched it all. I think we've watched 2 episodes so far.
I can't believe how funny, it's like, and I know some people hate him. I love him. How tender and biting and honest and funny. And he writes and directs all of them. And what's great is he's the foil for everyone. He lets everyone else be these big characters, and his understated eye rolls and sighs. Oh man, it just kills me.
No, it's a great show. And when you told me about it, I watched it, and that, that was a couple of years ago now, or a year ago anyway, for season 1. And
yeah, love it.
It was not what I expected at all. And like you said, it's one of those shows, I always used to say this about The Simpsons, which is one of my favorite shows of all time, at least until it jumped the shark. But the thing about The Simpsons that to me was so good was how real it was in early days. Yeah. No. And that was a cartoon, but and this show gets that to me. It's like, it's funny and it's got comedy, but it's super real. No,
it's so great. And I love it. All right. Is there any shows that you want to throw out to me or that you're watching?
So, I'm always about 6 months to, I'm going to say 36 months behind the curve, right? So is that a big range?
No, I think everyone gets what you're saying here.
And so we've just recently started watching Ozark. And we're about halfway through season 1. And
man,
it's solid.
So like good. I criticized it at the beginning because Jason Bateman is like, it's like the phrase, Charlie Brown, you couldn't be any more Charlie Brownier, or whatever that was. And Jason Bateman's that. Jason Bateman is always Jason Bateman. It's not like he has a big stretch on these things of like De Niro and, whatever. Right. Maybe you could have, but he's so good. And he directed and produced, he produced it and directed several of the episodes, and it gets better. You're in for a treat. I'm so sad that I watched the last season already, like plowed through it already, because it's one of those things where it just gets better and better and better and better.
Is that show done? Or is it
No. They left a cliffhanger. So it's not the end of the series, but it's the end of the season 3. And so it's, so there's more coming. Yeah. It's so good.
Yeah.
All right.
So we've been trying to go maybe 1 or 2 episodes a night.
Oh, it's perfect. That's perfect. Perfect pace. Because you remember it and think about it and want to see the next ones. All right. So what did we learn today, Steve? We learned that the Great Basin Collared Lizard, named based on the region and the coloration of him because of the collar, and he has small white spots. That intrigues me for some reason. Okay. Of all the coloration, that thing stuck out to me.
That's interesting.
There. Yeah. I also learned that clutches equates to bunches of eggs.
Okay. I did explain a couple terms, but that's one that I didn't think I actually needed to. But
thanks, buddy. Yeah, I know what that. I'll read between the lines on what that means. And then that the Pleasant Valley Reservoir. This is a place in your near and dear to you.
Yeah, but don't go fishing there because there's definitely not huge brown trout that live in there.
Oh, you don't want. Oh, did you just give away a secret fishing spot?
Nope. No.
All right. You also learned that you don't know what BJ and the Bear is.
Still don't. I'm gonna
Oh,
look that
dude, and
as soon as
that you didn't have Dukes of Hazard in your life when you were a kid.
no Dukes.
I find that so sad. I find that incredibly sad because it was so influential in my. And you never saw Daisy Duke. You never saw Daisy
No,
Duke.
no. But I know what Daisy Dukes are.
Oh man.
Yeah.
And then three things for our listeners to watch: the Seinfeld special, a must. That's you too.
Okay.
Afterlife, Ricky Gervais, Afterlife, and then Ozark, which
Which
is
everyone's already watched, right?
you can't assume that because there could be someone who's 48 months behind the curve, Steve.
I guess if they're listening to this podcast, they probably haven't seen Ozark yet.
If you're listening to this pod, I don't want to make any judgments on our listeners. So, all right. Well, we're going to call episode 4 a wrap.
I appreciate it. It was good talking to you as always, Greg.
Always. All right. See you soon, buddy.
Bye.
Cheers.